The horse came thundering down Main Street, like the devil himself was chasing it. Foam flying from its mouth and eyes rolling white with terror, and Grace Reynolds knew with absolute certainty that she was about to die. She had stepped out of the Mercantile in Naco, Arizona Territory, on that sweltering July afternoon in 1882, with nothing more pressing on her mind than whether to choose the blue calico or the yellow gingham for her new dress. The package tucked under her arm contained neither, as she had decided to wait until the following week to make her selection. Now, watching 1,500 pounds of panicked horseflesh charging directly toward her, fabric choices seemed absurdly trivial. Grace's feet refused to move. Her body locked in place as if her boots had been nailed to the dusty boardwalk. The rational part of her brain screamed at her to run, to dive, to do something other than stand there like a statue awaiting destruction. But fear had paralyzed her completely, and all she could do was watch death approach at a full gallop. Then someone slammed into her from the side. The world spun in a chaos of blue sky and brown earth as strong arms wrapped around her waist and pulled her off the boardwalk. She hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind from her lungs. The stranger who had grabbed her rolled with her, his body positioned protectively over hers as they tumbled into the narrow space between two buildings. The runaway horse thundered past, close enough that Grace felt the vibration of its hooves through the packed earth beneath her. For several seconds, Grace could only lie there, struggling to catch her breath, staring up at the man who had saved her life. He was young, probably no more than 25, with dark brown hair that fell across his forehead and eyes the color of creek water in summer. Dust covered his weathered shirt and leather vest, and a thin scar traced a pale line along his jaw. He was looking down at her with an expression of concern mixed with something else she could not quite identify. "Are you hurt?" His voice was low and rough, with a slight drawl that marked him as someone who had spent considerable time in Texas before arriving in Arizona Territory. Grace tried to answer but could only manage a small gasp as her lungs finally remembered how to function. She shook her head instead, then attempted to sit up. The stranger helped her, his calloused hands gentle as he supported her shoulders. "Take your time," he said. "You had quite a scare." That was putting it mildly. Grace's hands were shaking, and she clasped them together in her lap to hide the tremor. Now that the immediate danger had passed, the full weight of what had nearly happened crashed over her. She could have been trampled. She would have been trampled if not for this man's quick actions. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "You saved my life." He helped her to her feet, steadying her when her knees threatened to buckle. "Just happened to be in the right place at the right time, madam." Grace looked up at him properly now that they were both standing. He was tall, lean in the way of men who spent their lives working hard physical labor, with broad shoulders and capable hands. There was something about him that drew her attention beyond simple gratitude, something in the way he looked at her that made her heart beat faster for reasons that had nothing to do with her recent brush with death. Without thinking, without considering propriety or consequences or what anyone might think, Grace rose up on her toes and kissed him. It was not a chaste kiss of gratitude, though that was certainly how she intended it to start. But the moment her lips touched his, something shifted. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, and suddenly Grace was acutely aware of every point of contact between them. His hand still rested on her waist, steadying her. Her fingers had somehow found their way to his chest, feeling the steady thrum of his heartbeat beneath the fabric of his shirt. The kiss deepened, and Grace felt something unlock inside her chest, something warm and golden and terrifying in its intensity. When they finally broke apart, the stranger looked as stunned as Grace felt. His green eyes were wide, and his breathing had gone uneven. "I should not have done that," Grace said, though she did not feel particularly sorry. "That was completely inappropriate." "I am not complaining," the stranger replied. A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his already handsome features into something that made Grace's pulse race. "Though I should at least know the name of the woman who just kissed me senseless in an alley." "Despite everything," Grace laughed. "Grace Reynolds, and I did not kiss you senseless. You are still standing and speaking coherently. Deacon Ellis and I beg to differ. I am not entirely certain my legs are working properly." He proved this by taking a slightly unsteady step forward, though Grace suspected he was exaggerating for effect. "And your name suits you perfectly. Does it?" Grace bent to retrieve her package, which had gone flying during their dramatic rescue. The contents had scattered, and Deacon helped her gather the sewing supplies she had actually purchased. Grace under pressure. "You did not scream or faint." "I was too terrified to do either," Grace admitted. "I have never been that frightened in my life." They emerged from the alley to find that someone had finally caught the runaway horse. A small crowd had gathered, and several people rushed forward when they saw Grace. Among them was her employer, Martha Reynolds, no relation despite sharing a surname, who owned the boarding house where Grace worked. "Grace, thank heavens you are all right. When I saw that horse heading straight for you, I thought." Martha did not finish the sentence. She was a stout woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a maternal manner that had made Grace feel welcome from her first day in Naco 6 months ago. "I am fine, thanks to Mr. Ellis." Grace gestured toward Deacon, who had removed his hat and was holding it politely in his hands. Martha looked between them with an expression that suggested she was noting far more than Grace would have liked. "Mr. Ellis, the whole town owes you a debt of gratitude. Grace is a treasure, and we would have been devastated to lose her." "Just doing what anyone would have done, madam," Deacon replied. "Nonsense. You risked your own life. That horse could have trampled you both." Martha placed a proprietary hand on Grace's shoulder. "You must come to supper tonight, Mr. Ellis, I insist." "It is the least we can do to thank you properly." Deacon's eyes found Grace's, and something passed between them, an unspoken question and answer. "I would be honored, madam." Grace felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. She told herself it was simply residual shock from her near-death experience, but she knew that was a lie. Something had happened in that kiss, something she could not explain or rationalize away. In the space of a few heartbeats, Deacon Ellis had become more than just the man who saved her life. He had become someone she very much wanted to know better. The crowd gradually dispersed as the excitement faded. The horse, it turned out, had broken free from the livery stable after being spooked by a snake. The owner of the livery was full of apologies and promises to reinforce his stalls. No one had been seriously hurt, though a produce cart had been overturned in the chaos, leaving a sad pile of crushed tomatoes in the middle of the street. Deacon walked with Grace and Martha back to the boarding house, carrying Grace's package despite her protests that she was perfectly capable of managing it herself. As they walked, he explained that he had arrived in Naco just 3 days earlier, hired on at the Circle K ranch about 5 miles outside town. "I am a ranch hand, though I am hoping to save enough to start my own spread someday," he told them. "Been working ranches since I was 15, learned everything about cattle and horses. Figured Arizona territory was as good a place as any to put down roots." "Where are you from originally?" Grace asked. She was intensely curious about him, wanting to know everything all at once. "Born in Texas, near San Antonio. Moved around quite a bit after my parents passed. Worked in New Mexico territory for a while, then heard there was good land to be had here if a man was willing to work for it." Martha's boarding house was a large two-story structure on the east side of town, painted white with green shutters and a wide front porch where guests often sat in the evenings to escape the heat. Grace had a small room on the second floor that she rented in exchange for helping Martha with the cooking and cleaning. It was not the life Grace had imagined for herself when she was younger, but it was honest work, and Martha treated her well. "Supper is at 6 o'clock sharp," Martha informed Deacon as they reached the front steps. "Do not be late. I cannot abide tardiness." "I will be here at 5:59, madam," Deacon promised. He handed Grace her package, and their fingers brushed in the exchange. The contact sent a shiver up Grace's arm despite the oppressive heat. "Until tonight, Miss Reynolds." Grace watched him walk away, admiring the confident set of his shoulders and the easy way he moved. She did not realize she was staring until Martha cleared her throat meaningfully. "That is a good man," Martha said, "and if I am not mistaken, he is quite taken with you." "We only just met," Grace protested, but she could not keep the smile off her face. "Sometimes that is all it takes. I knew my Henry for exactly 30 minutes before I knew I would marry him. When it is right, and no amount of time will change that." Grace had heard the story of Martha and her late husband many times. They had been married for 32 years before he passed away from pneumonia. Martha spoke of him with such love and longing that it made Grace's heart ache. She had never experienced anything like that herself, had never even come close. At 22, she had begun to wonder if she ever would. But now, thinking of Deacon Ellis and the way that kiss had felt, Grace allowed herself to hope. The afternoon passed in a blur of activity. Grace helped Martha prepare supper, peeling potatoes and snapping green beans while her mind wandered to thoughts of green eyes and gentle hands. There were 5 other boarders currently staying at the house, all men who worked at various jobs around Naco. They would join them for supper, along with Deacon. Grace changed her dress twice before finally settling on a simple gray cotton with white lace at the collar. She brushed her long blonde hair until it shone, then pinned it up in a style that was practical but still flattering. She told herself she was not primping for Deacon specifically, but that was another lie. She wanted him to look at her the way he had in the alley, with warmth and admiration and something deeper that made her stomach flutter. At 5:58, there was a knock at the front door. Grace was in the kitchen when she heard it, but Martha called her to come answer it since she was elbow-deep in gravy. Deacon stood on the porch with his hat in his hands and a bouquet of wildflowers that he must have picked on his walk back to town. He had cleaned up, his face freshly shaved and his hair still damp from washing. He wore a clean shirt under his vest, and Grace caught the faint scent of soap. "These are for you," he said, offering the flowers. "I know it is not much, but I wanted to bring something." Grace took them, touched by the gesture. "They are beautiful, thank you. Not as beautiful as you." The compliment was simple and sincere, and it made Grace's cheeks warm. "You are quite the charmer, Mr. Ellis. Deacon, please, and I am not trying to charm you. I am simply speaking the truth." Martha appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mr. Ellis, right on time, just as you promised. Come in, come in. Supper is almost ready." The meal was a lively affair. The other boarders were all friendly men, and they peppered Deacon with questions about his experiences working ranches in Texas and New Mexico. Deacon answered them all with good humor, telling stories that had everyone laughing. Grace found herself watching him more than eating, fascinated by the way he interacted with others so easily. After supper, when the dishes were cleared and the other men had retreated to the parlor to smoke and play cards, Deacon asked if Grace would like to take a walk. Martha gave her permission with a knowing smile that made Grace blush again. The evening air was cooler than the afternoon had been. though still warm enough that Grace did not need a shawl. Deacon offered his arm, and she took it, hyper-aware of the solid muscle beneath her hand. They walked slowly through the quiet streets of Naco, passing houses where lamplight glowed in windows and the sounds of families settling in for the night drifted out. "I cannot stop thinking about this afternoon," Deacon said, after they had walked in comfortable silence for several minutes. "About that kiss." Grace's heart skipped. "I should apologize again for that. It was terribly forward of me. Please do not apologize. It was the best thing that has happened to me in a long time." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "I know this is going to sound crazy. We only just met, and I do not have any right to say this, but I feel something when I look at you, Grace. Something I have never felt before." "I feel it too," Grace admitted. "It is like being struck by lightning. Exactly like that." Deacon reached up and gently cupped her cheek with his hand. "I am not a rich man. I am just a ranch hand with dreams of something more. But I am honest and hard-working, and I would very much like to court you properly if you would allow it." Grace's breath caught. This was happening so fast, faster than anything she had experienced before. Every rational thought told her to slow down, to take time to think and consider. But her heart, that traitorous organ, was singing a different tune entirely. "I would like that very much," she said. Deacon's smile was brilliant. "Then may I kiss you again? Properly this time, without the excuse of shock or near-death experiences?" "Yes," Grace whispered. This kiss was different from the first. It was slower, more deliberate, full of promise rather than panic. Deacon's lips were soft against hers, and when his arms came around her waist, Grace felt safe and cherished in a way she had never experienced. She kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands sliding up to rest on his shoulders. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Deacon rested his forehead against hers, and Grace could feel his smile against her skin. "You are something special, Grace Reynolds," he murmured. "I knew it the moment I saw you standing there in danger. My heart just about stopped." "You saved me," Grace said. "I owe you everything." "You do not owe me anything. But I hope you will give me the chance to earn your affection honestly, through time and attention, and showing you every day how much you mean to me." They walked back to the boarding house hand in hand, making plans to see each other again soon. Deacon's work at the Circle K would keep him busy during the week, but he promised to come to town every Sunday, which was his day off. Grace felt like she was floating, her feet barely touching the ground. Over the following weeks, Deacon kept his promise. Every Sunday, he would arrive at the boarding house freshly scrubbed and smiling, and he and Grace would spend the entire day together. Sometimes they went on long walks, exploring the desert landscape around Naco. Other times they sat on the porch, talking for hours about everything and nothing. Deacon told her about his childhood in Texas, about losing his parents to yellow fever when he was 14, about the hard years that followed as he worked any job he could find to survive. Grace shared her own story in return. She had grown up in St. Louis, the youngest daughter of a failed merchant who drank away what little money the family had. When she turned 18, she had used her small inheritance from her grandmother to travel west, seeking a fresh start away from the shame and poverty of her childhood. She had worked various jobs in various towns before landing in Naco, where Martha's kindness had finally given her a sense of stability. "I used to think I was running away," Grace confessed one afternoon as they sat by the small creek that ran along the eastern edge of town. "But now I think I was running toward something, toward this place, toward you." Deacon took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I believe things happen for a reason. That horse breaking free, me being in exactly the right spot at the right time. It feels like fate." "Do you believe in fate?" "I did not used to, but meeting you has changed my mind about a lot of things." Their courtship was the talk of the town, though not in an unkind way. The people of Naco seemed genuinely happy to see Grace find love. Martha was particularly pleased, often remarking that she had never seen Grace so happy. 3 months after that fateful day on Main Street, Deacon arrived at the boarding house with news that made Grace's heart soar. The Circle K ranch was expanding, and the owner had offered Deacon a position as foreman with a significant increase in pay. More importantly, the position came with a small house on the ranch property. "It is not much," Deacon said as they sat together on the porch swing. "Just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it is solid and has good bones. With some work, it could be a real home." Grace understood what he was asking without him having to say the words outright. "That sounds wonderful." Deacon took both her hands in his expression nervous but hopeful. "Grace, I know we have not been courting very long by most standards, but I am more certain of this than I have ever been certain of anything in my life. I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you laugh at my terrible jokes. I love how you see the good in people and how you make me want to be a better man. I want to build a life with you, to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Grace's eyes, but they were happy tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, absolutely yes." Deacon pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. "It was my mother's," he explained. "It is the only thing of hers I have left. I would be honored if you would wear it." The ring fit perfectly on Grace's finger, as if it had been made for her. She threw her arms around Deacon's neck, and he lifted her off the ground, spinning her around while she laughed with pure joy. They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Naco. Martha stood as Grace's witness, tears streaming down her face throughout the entire service. The owner of the Circle K, a gruff but kind-hearted man named Jonathan Mitchell, stood up for Deacon. Half the town attended, cramming into the small church to witness the union of the cowboy who had saved Grace's life and the woman whose kiss had changed his. Grace wore a dress of pale blue silk that Martha had helped her sew, and Deacon wore a new black suit that he had ordered specially from Tucson. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and Deacon kissed her, Grace felt that same electric thrill she had felt in the alley months before. But this time it was deeper, richer, full of promise and commitment and a future she could barely wait to begin. The little house on the Circle K ranch became their sanctuary. It was indeed small, as Deacon had warned, but Grace loved it immediately. She spent her first weeks as a married woman making it into a home, sewing curtains for the windows and arranging the modest furniture they had purchased. Deacon had carved them a beautiful headboard for their bed, decorated with a pattern of wildflowers that reminded Grace of the bouquet he had brought her the night they first had supper together. Life on the ranch was hard work, but Grace thrived in it. She took over the vegetable garden that the previous foreman's wife had started, expanding it, and using the produce to feed not just herself and Deacon, but also the ranch hands who often stopped by for a meal. She learned to ride a horse properly, something Deacon taught her with infinite patience, and soon she was comfortable enough to ride out to the range to bring Deacon his lunch. Their love deepened with each passing day. Deacon was everything Grace had hoped for in a husband and more. He was gentle and passionate, making her feel desired and cherished. They talked about everything, sharing their hopes and dreams and fears. On cold desert nights they would lie in bed together, Deacon's arms wrapped around Grace, and plan their future. "I want children," Grace told him one night about 5 months into their marriage, "at least 3 or 4. "I want that too," Deacon replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I want to fill this house with laughter and noise. I want to teach our sons to ride and rope. I want to watch our daughters grow up as beautiful and strong as their mother. You assume we will have both sons and daughters. I assume we will be blessed with whatever children God sees fit to give us, and we will love them all equally." He turned her in his arms so they were facing each other. "You have made me so happy, Grace. Sometimes I think about that day, about what could have happened if I had been a second slower, if I had not been in exactly the right place. It terrifies me." "But you were there," Grace said, touching his face gently. "You saved me, and now we have this beautiful life together. No more thinking about what might have been. We have what is, and it is perfect." 6 months later, Grace discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and excitement. Deacon became even more attentive, if that was possible, constantly worried about Grace doing too much or overexerting herself. Grace found his concern endearing, though she also had to frequently remind him that pregnancy was not an illness, and she was perfectly capable of continuing her normal activities. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Grace felt healthy and strong, and the ranch women who had delivered babies before assured her that all the signs pointed to an easy birth. Deacon began working on an addition to the house, building a separate bedroom for the baby with the help of some of the other ranch hands. He crafted a beautiful wooden cradle with his own hands, working on it in the evenings by lamplight, his face concentrated and serious. In the spring of 1884, nearly 2 years after that runaway horse had changed everything, Grace gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when both Grace and Deacon feared for her safety. But she was strong, and with the help of the ranch doctor and several experienced women, she brought their son into the world just as dawn was breaking. Deacon was allowed into the bedroom to meet his son, and the look on his face made every moment of pain worthwhile. He held the tiny bundle with infinite care, tears streaming down his face as he examined every finger and toe. "He is perfect," Deacon whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "He looks just like you. He has your eyes," Grace said. Indeed, the baby's eyes, when he opened them, were the same greenish color as his father's. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names extensively during the pregnancy but had been unable to agree on anything definite. Now, looking at their son, the name came to both of them simultaneously. "Henry," Grace said. "After Martha's husband," Deacon agreed. "She would be honored." Martha was indeed honored, and she immediately declared herself the baby's honorary grandmother. She visited frequently, bringing gifts and advice in equal measure. The baby thrived under so much love and attention, growing strong and healthy. Life settled into a new rhythm. Grace learned to balance motherhood with her other responsibilities, and Deacon proved to be a devoted and hands-on father. Despite the long hours his job demanded, he always made time for his family. He would come home tired and dusty from a day on the range, but the moment he saw Henry, his face would light up with joy. When Henry was 6 months old, Jonathan Mitchell called Deacon into his office. The old rancher was getting on in years and had no children of his own. He had been impressed by Deacon's work ethic and leadership abilities, as well as the respect the other ranch hands showed him. "I want to make you a partner," Mitchell told Deacon. "I am getting too old to run this place by myself, and my nephew, who is supposed to inherit, has no interest in ranching. You have proven yourself time and again. I want to sign over 30% of the ranch to you now, with the agreement that when I pass, you will have the option to buy out my nephew's share at a fair price." Deacon was stunned. "Sir, I do not know what to say. That is incredibly generous." "It is good business," Mitchell said gruffly. "You have earned this, Deacon. I know you will take care of this place the way it deserves." Deacon rushed home to tell Grace the news, arriving in the middle of the afternoon and sweeping her up into his arms despite her protests that she was covered in flour from baking. "We are partners in the Circle K," he said, spinning her around just as he had the day she agreed to marry him. "Partial owners. Grace, this means everything I dreamed of is coming true. We will have security for our family. We can expand the house, save money for Henry's education, maybe even buy more land." Grace laughed with delight, caught up in his enthusiasm. "This is wonderful news. You have worked so hard for this." "We have worked hard for this," Deacon corrected. "You are my partner in everything, Grace. None of this would mean anything without you." That night, after Henry was asleep in his cradle and the house was quiet, Grace and Deacon lay in bed discussing the future. The possibilities seemed endless now. They talked about expanding the ranch, about buying the neighboring property that was up for sale, about giving Henry siblings to grow up alongside. "I want to give you everything," Deacon said, running his fingers through Grace's long hair. "I want to build you the biggest house in Arizona territory. I want to cover you in jewels and fine dresses." "I do not need those things," Grace replied. "I just need you and Henry and the life we are building together. That is all I have ever wanted. How did I get so lucky?" Deacon wondered aloud. "If that horse had not run away, if I had been standing anywhere else in town, if you had not kissed me and made me realize what I had been missing my entire life." "We make our own luck," Grace said. "You chose to act, to risk yourself to save a stranger. And I chose to follow my heart instead of propriety. Those choices led us here." Over the next few years, their life continued to blossom. The ranch prospered under Deacon's leadership and Mitchell's guidance. They expanded their herd and hired more ranch hands. Grace became known throughout the territory for her hospitality, often hosting dinners for neighboring ranchers and their families. She had also become an unofficial midwife, having learned much from her own pregnancy and birth, and she assisted many ranch women in delivering their babies. When Henry was 3 years old, Grace became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and she delivered a healthy baby girl without complications. They named her Martha Rose, and the real Martha cried for an hour straight when she learned the baby's name. Martha Rose was a beautiful child with blonde hair like her mother and a sweet, sunny disposition. Henry, now old enough to understand that he was a big brother, took his role very seriously. He was constantly trying to help with the baby, bringing her things she did not need and patting her head gently. 2 years later, another son joined the family, whom they named Samuel. Sam was a loud, energetic baby who seemed to have twice the energy of Henry at that age. The house was now truly full of the laughter and noise Deacon had dreamed of. Jonathan Mitchell passed away peacefully in his sleep when Henry was 7 years old. As promised, Deacon was given the option to purchase the remaining shares of the ranch from Mitchell's nephew, who was only too happy to take the money and return to San Francisco, where he had been living. At the age of 32, Deacon became the sole owner of the Circle K Ranch, one of the most successful cattle operations in southern Arizona territory. With success came challenges. There were droughts to weather, market fluctuations to navigate, and the ever-present threat of cattle rustlers. But through it all, Deacon and Grace faced everything together. She was his advisor and confidant, the person he trusted above all others. When he was considering a risky business decision, it was Grace's opinion he sought. When he was exhausted and doubted himself, it was Grace who reminded him of how far they had come. The house was expanded multiple times as their family and prosperity grew. What had started as 2 rooms and a kitchen eventually became a sprawling ranch house with 6 bedrooms, a proper dining room, and a parlor where Grace hosted the wives of other ranchers for tea and conversation. But Grace's favorite room remained the original bedroom, where she and Deacon still slept in the bed with the wildflower headboard he had carved for her all those years ago. When Grace was 35, she became pregnant for the fourth and final time. The pregnancy was difficult, and both she and Deacon knew that this would be their last child. She gave birth to another boy, whom they named Thomas. Tommy was a quiet, thoughtful baby who grew into a quiet, thoughtful child, content to sit and watch the world around him with serious dark eyes. The years passed in a blur of activity and joy. Henry grew into a strong, responsible young man who worked alongside his father on the ranch. At 19, he was already being groomed to eventually take over the operation. Martha Rose, at 16, was beautiful and spirited, with her mother's kindness and her father's determination. She had recently begun courting the son of a neighboring rancher, a respectful young man named Thomas, which caused some confusion given that Grace and Deacon's youngest was also named Thomas. Sam, at 14, was still as energetic as ever, always looking for adventure and excitement. He talked constantly about becoming a lawman when he grew up, much to Deacon's dismay. And Tommy, at 8, had discovered a love of books and learning that suggested he might be the first in the family to attend university. Martha, now in her 70s, still came to visit regularly, though her health was beginning to fail. She moved slower than she used to, and her eyesight was going, but her mind was as sharp as ever. She loved spending time with the Ellis children, telling them stories about their parents' courtship and the dramatic rescue that had started it all. One evening, as Grace and Deacon sat on the porch watching the sun set over the desert, Grace found herself reflecting on the incredible life they had built. It had been 18 years since that runaway horse had changed everything. 18 years of love and laughter, of hard work and hard times, of raising children and building a legacy. "Do you ever think about that day?" Grace asked, leaning against Deacon's shoulder. "I think about it all the time," Deacon replied. "Best day of my life, even though it started with you nearly dying. It is strange how life works. I was so frightened, certain I was about to die. And then you were there, and then I kissed you, and suddenly I was more alive than I had ever been." Deacon pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "That kiss did change everything. It changed me. Before I met you, I was just drifting, working jobs and saving money, but without any real purpose. You gave me something to work for, something to build toward. You gave me a reason to want more from life." "We gave that to each other," Grace corrected. "I was lost too, remember? Running from a past I was ashamed of, working just to survive. You made me believe I deserved more. You made me believe I was worth loving." "You are worth everything," Deacon said fiercely. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Grace Ellis. Every morning I wake up grateful that I was standing in that exact spot at that exact moment, that I was fast enough, brave enough to act. That you were brave enough to kiss a stranger in an alley." Grace laughed. "I was not being brave. I was being impulsive and possibly foolish. You were being true to your heart. That takes more courage than most people ever manage." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. From inside the house, they could hear the sounds of their children preparing for bed. Sam was arguing with Tommy about something, their voices drifting out through an open window. Martha Rose was singing softly to herself in her room. Henry had gone out with Thomas, the neighbor boy, but would be home soon. "We did well," Grace said softly. "Look at what we built. This home, this family, this life. We did well." "We did better than well," Deacon replied. "We did extraordinary." Martha passed away peacefully the following winter, surrounded by people she loved. Grace grieved deeply for the woman who had been more than an employer, who had become a true friend and surrogate mother. At the funeral, Grace spoke about how Martha had given her a chance when she had nothing, had welcomed her, and eventually brought Deacon into her life by inviting him to supper that fateful evening. She believed in love, Grace told the gathered mourners. She believed that when you found it, you should hold on to it with both hands and never let go. She told me once that she knew she would marry her Henry within 30 minutes of meeting him. I understand that now. Sometimes you just know. And if you are lucky enough to find that kind of love, you do not waste it. You nurture it and cherish it and let it grow into something beautiful. Henry, Grace and Deacon's son, married Thomas's sister Abigail the following spring. It was a joyous occasion that brought both families together. The wedding was held at the Circle K Ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food enough to feed half the territory. Grace watched her firstborn son pledge his life to the woman he loved and felt her heart might burst with happiness. Sam eventually realized his dream of becoming a lawman, joining the territorial marshal service at 20. It was dangerous work, and Grace worried constantly, but she was also proud of him. He was good at his job, fair and brave, with a reputation for being able to talk down troublemakers before violence became necessary. Martha Rose married her Thomas and moved to his family's ranch, where she helped her husband expand their operation. She visited often, bringing her own children as they came along, making Grace and Deacon grandparents multiple times over. Tommy did indeed become the first member of the family to attend university, studying law at a school in California. He returned to Arizona and opened a practice in Tucson, where he fought for the rights of ranchers and settlers who were often taken advantage of by larger interests. As Grace and Deacon entered their 40s and then their 50s, they remained as devoted to each other as they had been from the beginning. If anything, their love had deepened with time, weathered by challenges and strengthened by shared experiences. They still kissed every morning and every evening. They still held hands when they walked. They still looked at each other with the same warmth and admiration that had sparked in an alley all those years ago. Deacon's hair went gray at the temples, and lines formed around his eyes from years of squinting into the desert sun. Grace's blonde hair gained threads of silver, and her hands became rough from years of hard work. But when Deacon looked at her, he still saw the beautiful woman who had kissed him senseless. And when Grace looked at him, she still saw the handsome cowboy who had saved her life. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Deacon had a surprise for Grace. He had commissioned a painting based on a photograph they had taken on their wedding day. The painting showed them young and hopeful, standing together in front of the church where they had exchanged vows. But the artist had also done something special. In the background, barely visible, was the scene of Deacon pulling Grace out of the path of the runaway horse. "So we never forget where we started," Deacon explained as Grace stared at the painting with tears in her eyes. "So our children and grandchildren will know the story of how we found each other." "It is perfect," Grace whispered. "You are perfect. I am far from perfect, but I am perfectly in love with you, and I have been from the moment I first held you in my arms." They hung the painting in the parlor, where it became a centerpiece of the home. Visitors always asked about it, and Grace and Deacon would take turns telling the story. The tale grew slightly embellished over the years, as good stories do. The horse became faster, the danger more dramatic, the kiss more passionate, but the heart of the story remained true. A cowboy had saved a woman from a runaway horse. She had thanked him with a kiss, and that kiss had changed everything. More grandchildren arrived as the years continued to pass. Grace became the beloved matriarch of a large, sprawling family, hosting gatherings where children ran wild through the house and yard while adults caught up on news and gossip. Deacon, now with a full head of white hair, was the respected patriarch, a man known throughout the territory for his fairness and business acumen. They celebrated their 25th anniversary surrounded by family. Henry gave a toast, thanking his parents for showing him what true love looked like and for building a legacy the entire family could be proud of. Martha Rose, pregnant with her fourth child, cried through her own speech about how blessed they all were to be part of this family. Sam, home on leave from his marshal duties, presented them with a pair of matching silver belt buckles. And Tommy, ever the lawyer, had drawn up papers officially naming their ranch Ellis Legacy Ranch, ensuring it would stay in the family for generations to come. As Grace looked around at all the people gathered to celebrate her marriage, she was overwhelmed with gratitude. Every person in that room, every child and grandchild, existed because of a single moment of courage and impulse. Because Deacon had been brave enough to act, and Grace had been brave enough to follow her heart. In their late 50s, Grace and Deacon finally began to slow down. They hired a manager to oversee the day-to-day operations of the ranch, though Deacon still went out most days to check on things and advise the younger workers. Grace spent more time in her garden and with her grandchildren, teaching the girls to sew and cook, and the boys to garden and appreciate growing things. They traveled some, taking a trip to San Francisco that Martha Rose helped arrange, and another to Texas so Deacon could show Grace where he grew up. But they always returned to the Circle K, to the home they had built together, eager to sleep in their own bed beneath the wildflower headboard. One autumn evening, when Grace was 60 and Deacon was 63, they sat together on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. The air was cool and pleasant, carrying the scent of the desert after a rare rain. Deacon's arm was around Grace's shoulders, and her head rested against his chest, positioned perfectly to hear the steady beat of his heart. "I have been thinking," Deacon said, "about that kiss in the alley. What about it?" Grace asked, smiling at the memory that was as clear in her mind as if it had happened yesterday instead of nearly 30 years ago. "I never properly thanked you for being brave enough to kiss me, for seeing something in me worth kissing. You took a chance on a dusty cowboy with nothing but dreams and determination. You could have just said thank you politely and walked away, but you did not. You kissed me, and in doing so, you gave me everything." Grace lifted her head to look at him. Even with the lines on his face and the white in his hair, he was still the most handsome man she had ever seen. "You saved my life. What else could I have done? You saved mine too, you know, not from a runaway horse but from a life of loneliness and emptiness. Before you, I was alive but not really living. You taught me what it means to truly live, to love, to build something meaningful." "We saved each other," Grace said. "That is what love does. It saves us from ourselves, from loneliness, from settling for less than we deserve." Deacon cupped her face in his weathered hands and kissed her with the same passion and tenderness he had shown from the very beginning. Grace kissed him back, still feeling that electric thrill that had never faded. Some things, she had learned, only got better with time. As they sat together watching the stars emerge, Grace reflected on the incredible journey their lives had taken. From that terrifying moment when a runaway horse had charged toward her, through the whirlwind courtship and early struggles of marriage, to the prosperity and family they now enjoyed. Every moment had been worth it. Every challenge had made them stronger. The grandchildren continued to arrive over the years, until Grace lost count of exactly how many she had. There were at least 15 at last count, maybe more, ranging from babies to teenagers. The Ellis family had become a significant presence in southern Arizona, known for their successful ranches and their dedication to community and family. When Arizona achieved statehood in 1912, it was Tommy who attended the ceremonies as a representative of the territory's legal community. Grace and Deacon were too old to make the journey by then, both in their 70s, but they celebrated at home with family and friends. Deacon joked that they had been pioneers in more ways than one, helping to settle and build the territory that had now become a state. Henry had fully taken over the operation of the Ellis Legacy Ranch by this point, proving himself to be as capable a rancher as his father. He expanded the operation even further, taking advantage of new technologies and methods while still maintaining the values and traditions his parents had instilled in him. His own children, Grace and Deacon's grandchildren, were already working on the ranch, learning the business from their father just as he had learned from his. In the spring of 1915, Grace and Deacon celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. They were both in their 70s now, moving slower but still sharp-minded and devoted to each other. The celebration was smaller than previous anniversaries, just immediate family gathered at the ranch house for a quiet dinner. During the meal, Henry asked his parents to share their favorite memory from their 40 years together. Grace and Deacon looked at each other, communicating silently in the way that couples who have been together for decades can do. "The day we met," Grace said. "The day your father saved me from that runaway horse and I kissed him in the alley." "Really?" Martha Rose asked. "After all these years, all the wonderful things that have happened, that is still your favorite?" "Everything else came from that moment," Deacon explained. "Every joy we have experienced, every child and grandchild, every success and milestone. None of it would have been possible without that day, without your mother's courage in following her heart and kissing a man she had just met. Plus," Grace added with a mischievous smile, "it was a really good kiss." Everyone laughed and the conversation moved on to other topics. But later that night, after all the guests had gone home or retired to bed, Grace and Deacon sat together in their bedroom, the room that had been theirs for 40 years. "I meant what I said at dinner," Grace told him as they got ready for bed. "That day really is my favorite memory. Not because of what happened after, though I treasure every moment we have shared, but because of the feeling I had when I kissed you. The absolute certainty that my life had just changed forever, that I had found something precious and rare. I have never doubted that feeling, not for a single moment in 40 years. I love you, Grace Ellis," Deacon said, pulling her into his arms. "I have loved you from the moment you kissed me in that alley. I will love you until the day I die and beyond that if such a thing is possible." "It is possible," Grace assured him. "Love like ours does not end just because life does. It goes on in our children and grandchildren, in the legacy we have built, in the example we have set. We will live on through them." They fell asleep that night as they had every night for 40 years, wrapped in each other's arms, hearts beating in rhythm. Two souls perfectly matched. Grace passed away peacefully in her sleep 3 years later, at the age of 76. She went to bed beside Deacon one night and simply did not wake up the next morning. The doctor said her heart had given out, worn down by a lifetime of hard work and love. Deacon was devastated by the loss, grief-stricken in a way that frightened his children. For weeks after Grace's death, Deacon seemed lost. He wandered through the house they had shared, touching things she had touched, sitting in her favorite chair, sleeping on her side of the bed so he could smell her perfume on the pillow. The family worried that he might simply give up, that losing Grace would break him completely. But gradually, Deacon began to emerge from his grief. not because he missed Grace any less, but because he realized that giving up would dishonor everything they had built together. Grace would want him to keep living, to keep enjoying the family they had created, to find joy in the legacy they had established. He began spending more time with his grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandmother. He worked with Henry on the ranch, offering advice and guidance. He attended church every Sunday and sat in the pew where he and Grace had always sat together, feeling her presence beside him even though she was gone. On the first anniversary of Grace's death, Deacon commissioned a headstone for her grave in the cemetery outside Naco. The stone was made of white marble and engraved with her name, dates, and a simple inscription that Deacon had agonized over for weeks. In the end, he chose words that captured the essence of who Grace had been and what she had meant to him. Grace Reynolds Ellis, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother, she taught us how to love. Beneath the inscription, Deacon had the stonemason carve two images. On the left, a runaway horse. On the right, a pair of lips pressed together in a kiss. It was their story, reduced to its essential elements. Deacon lived for 2 more years after Grace's death. He remained active and engaged with his family, but everyone could see that a part of him had died with his wife. He spoke often of Grace, sharing memories and telling stories that kept her alive in the hearts and minds of everyone who listened. One evening in late spring, Deacon gathered his children and grandchildren at the ranch house. He was 80 years old now, and his health had been declining. He knew his time was limited, and there were things he wanted to say while he still could. "I want to thank you all," he began, his voice still strong despite his age, "for giving your mother and me the greatest gift anyone can receive. You gave us a family, a legacy, a reason to work hard and dream big. Everything I did for you and for her, and I regret nothing." He paused, looking around at the faces gathered in the parlor, seeing traces of Grace in Martha Rose's smile, in Henry's eyes, in Sam's laugh, in Tommy's serious expression. She lived on in all of them, and through them, she would never truly be gone. "I want to tell you about the day I met your mother one more time," Deacon continued. "I have told this story hundreds of times over the years, but I want to make sure you all understand what really happened that day. It was not just about saving her from a runaway horse, though that is how it started. It was about 2 people who were both lost finding each other. It was about courage and impulse and following your heart even when logic says otherwise. Your mother kissed me in an alley, and that kiss changed everything. It gave me purpose and direction. It gave me love and family. It gave me a reason to be better than I was. That kiss was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I have spent every day since trying to be worthy of it." There was not a dry eye in the room when he finished. Martha Rose came and hugged him, followed by each of his sons and then the grandchildren. They all told him how much they loved him, how grateful they were for the example he and Grace had set. Deacon passed away 3 weeks later, dying in his sleep just as Grace had. He was laid to rest beside her in the cemetery, beneath a headstone that matched hers. Henry chose the inscription this time, and everyone agreed it was perfect. Deacon Ellis, beloved husband, father, and grandfather, he showed us how to love. The Ellis Legacy Ranch continued to prosper for generations, passing from Henry to his children, and then to their children. The story of Grace and Deacon became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. The painting of their wedding day, with the runaway horse seen in the background, remained in the parlor of the original ranch house, preserved as a reminder of where it all began. The wildflower headboard that Deacon had carved for Grace was eventually donated to a museum in Tucson, where it was displayed as an example of pioneer craftsmanship and frontier love stories. A plaque beside it told the story of the cowboy who saved a woman from a runaway horse and the kiss that changed everything. The town of Naco continued to grow and change over the years, but there was always someone who remembered the Ellis family and the incredible love story that had started on Main Street all those years ago. When Arizona celebrated its centennial of statehood, the Ellis family was honored as one of the founding families of southern Arizona, pioneers who had helped build the state and whose legacy continued to influence the region. Martha Rose, the last surviving child of Grace and Deacon, lived to be 93 years old. Before she died, she gave an interview to a local newspaper about her parents and their legendary romance. She spoke with tears in her eyes about the love she had witnessed between them, about how they had never stopped looking at each other with wonder and affection, about how a single kiss in an alley had created a dynasty. "People talk about love at first sight like it is a fairy tale," Martha Rose told the reporter. "But I saw it with my own eyes. My parents fell in love instantly, completely, and forever. They showed all of us what real love looks like. It is not about grand gestures or perfect moments. It is about choosing each other every single day. It is about facing life's challenges together. It is about building something that lasts long after you are gone. That is what they did, and we are all blessed because of it." The Ellis family continues to thrive in Arizona to this day, now in its fifth and sixth generations since Grace and Deacon. They still tell the story of the runaway horse and the kiss that changed everything. They still visit the graves in Naco, bringing fresh flowers and standing in respectful silence as they remember the couple who started it all. And in the small museum in Tucson where the wildflower headboard is displayed, young couples often stop to read the story and admire the craftsmanship. Some of them hold hands as they read, imagining what it must have been like to experience such instant and powerful love. Others kiss when they think no one is looking, hoping that their own kiss might be the one that changes everything. Because that is the real legacy of Grace and Deacon Ellis. Not the ranch or the wealth or the famous family name. The real legacy is the reminder that love can strike like lightning, sudden and powerful and transformative. That sometimes you just know. That courage, whether it is the courage to save someone or the courage to kiss them, can lead to extraordinary things. And that a single moment, a heartbeat of time when a cowboy pulled a woman from danger and she responded with a kiss, can echo through generations, creating ripples that spread farther than anyone could imagine. Their story became proof that true love exists, that it can happen in the most unexpected circumstances, and that when you find it, you hold on tight and never let go. It became a beacon of hope for anyone who has ever felt lost or alone, a reminder that your person might be out there right now, waiting for you to be in exactly the right place at exactly the right moment. The runaway horse that started it all was never identified, and no one ever discovered what made it bolt that day. But the Ellis family liked to think that fate had played a hand, that the universe had conspired to bring Grace and Deacon together, because some loves are simply meant to be. And perhaps they were right, because the odds of everything falling into place exactly as it did, of Deacon being in that precise location at that precise second, of Grace having the courage to kiss him despite every social convention telling her not to, seem almost impossibly small. Yet it happened. And from that unlikely beginning grew a love story that would be remembered and celebrated for over a century. In the end, that is all any of us can hope for: to love and be loved in return, to build something meaningful that outlasts us, and to leave the world a little better than we found it. Grace and Deacon Ellis did all of that and more. They loved each other with a passion and devotion that never wavered. They built a family and a legacy that continues to thrive. And they left behind a story that reminds us all of the transformative power of love. Their graves in the cemetery outside Naco still stand, side by side. The marble weathered now, but the inscription still legible. Visitors sometimes leave wildflowers there, echoing the bouquet Deacon brought Grace on their first real evening together. And if you visit on a quiet day when the wind blows just right across the desert, you can almost hear their voices, laughing together, telling their story one more time to anyone who will listen. The story of a cowboy who saved a woman from a runaway horse, and she thanked him with a kiss that changed everything.